All right, we can go ahead and get started. So, hello and welcome to Beyond Benchmarking 101, a general overview of the Beyond Benchmarking compliance process and pathways for the City of San Jose's Energy and Water Building Performance Ordinance, or BPO for short. I'm Jenna, the Assistant Environmental Services Specialist on the BPO team at the City of San Jose. Please feel free to put your questions in the chat as we go through the presentation, and we will allow time at the end for questions and answers. You could go ahead to the next slide. So, what is Beyond Benchmarking? Beyond Benchmarking is the next phase of the greater BPO. Starting in 2023, building owners will be required to demonstrate either satisfactory building energy and water efficiency or efficiency improvement in annual cohorts as specified by the ordinance. Please note that Beyond Benchmarking is an entirely separate requirement that goes in addition to the annual benchmarking reports, which have been in place since 2019. When it is your compliance year for Beyond Benchmarking, you will be meeting the Beyond Benchmarking requirements in addition to the usual annual benchmarking requirements, which includes the benchmarking report and the benchmarking $150 fee. Benchmarking is an annual responsibility, while Beyond Benchmarking is an every 5-year responsibility. Next slide. Okay. If an owner can demonstrate that a covered building meets key performance standards through yearly benchmarking, the owner can complete the performance pathway. If a building is not able to meet these standards, the owner must complete the improvement pathway. A qualified licensed professional must assist the owner in these tasks. We will expand on the two pathways later on in the presentation. Next slide. So what are some of the benefits of Beyond Benchmarking? For one, identifying opportunities for energy and water savings, retuning building systems, and switching out inefficient equipment helps building owners save money, improve tenant comfort, and improve the building portfolio and bottom line. Second, Beyond Benchmarking is also critical in helping San Jose reach the emission reduction goals set forth in Climate Smart San Jose and the new pathway to carbon neutrality by 2030. As it stands, building energy use accounts for 34% of San Jose's greenhouse gas emissions. Approximately 12 other cities around the country, including New York City, Berkeley, and Seattle, have similar policies that have been in place for around the last 5 to 10 years. Next slide. Now we will be going through the various steps to Beyond Benchmarking compliance. Step 1 is to determine your compliance due date. Covered buildings will comply in annual cohorts and will be noticed by mail accordingly. You can find your compliance due date publicly posted in the annual Beyond Benchmarking compliance schedule found on our new Beyond Benchmarking website. The compliance schedule is based on 2 factors: the last digit of a building's assessor parcel number and the assessed gross building floor area of the building. Next slide. Each year, the Building Performance Ordinance team will post the annual cohort required to comply on our website. As the photo on the slide shows, the compliance schedule also includes a general compliance schedule for all covered buildings. If you aren't in the first cohort and/or need to find future compliance due dates, search the list for your building's assessor parcel number and gross floor area. The first cohort of buildings will be complying with Beyond Benchmarking by May 1st, 2023. This group of buildings are 50,000 square feet and greater and have an APN ending in 0 or 1. Please note that BPO staff default to organize cohorts and notify buildings according to the building's listed Santa Clara County tax assessor gross floor area or assessed gross floor area. Make sure that your building's gross floor area is verified with BPO staff if there are discrepancies between your assessed and actual gross floor area. Next slide. So step 2 of compliance is to determine whether your building qualifies for an exemption or not. The following are the qualifying exemption reasons for beyond benchmarking. Building is zoned as exclusively industrial, so that would mean zoned as heavy industrial, light industrial, or industrial park with a verified 50% of the gross floor area dedicated to industrial uses. Another exemption reason is building is under 20,000 square feet. And finally, an exemption reason that only applies to water, a residential building under 50,000 square feet that is not submetered for water use. If you qualify for any of the exemption reasons, an online exemption form needs to be completed and submitted by April 1st annually, including documentation of eligible reason through the Beyond Benchmarking website. Please note that the Beyond Benchmarking exemption forms are separate from the annual benchmarking exemption forms. So those two exemption forms would need to be filled out and submitted separately if you are planning to seek exemption from both. Next slide. Step 3 of compliance is to verify your building has complete energy and water benchmarking data for the 3 years prior to your due date. By complete, we mean a benchmarking report containing 12 months of both water and energy data that are compliant and correct. This means non-compliant years, benchmarking reports with pending revisions, inaccurate data, or missing data cannot meet performance verification and will automatically assign a building into the improvement pathway. Visit our main benchmarking website to submit or resubmit prior year's benchmarking reports. Please note that even if you decide to take the improvement pathway, you will still need to complete benchmarking data for comparison purposes in future cycles. So it is a good idea to get those benchmarking reports checked and squared away. Next slide. Step 4 of compliance is to determine your pathway for each utility, energy and water. You will pick from either the performance or improvement pathway. A building qualifies for the performance pathway if it meets key energy and water efficiency standards or is a new building, which means it has been occupied for less than 5 years from its first compliance due date. A building will fall under the improvement pathway if it does not satisfy key energy and water efficiency standards. Further detail on what exactly is meant by key efficiency standards can be found in our compliance guide and in the ordinance, which are both linked on the Beyond Benchmarking webpage. Please note that water and energy are treated separately, so one may qualify for the performance pathway while the other would have to do the improvement pathway. Next slide. Here's a graphic that goes into a little more detail on the key efficiency standards and the two pathways. Beyond benchmarking efficiency requirements are variable based on building type. Basically, for the first compliance cycle, buildings need to achieve a 3-year average Energy Star score of 75 or an energy use intensity that is no more than 25% below the mean use type. Score goals are equivalent for the water metrics. Improvement metrics of raising the score by 15 points or 15% will be applicable in future beyond benchmarking compliance cycles and will be compared to the average benchmarking scores of the previous cycle. Newly constructed buildings less than 5 years old and buildings holding current LEED certification at the time of their beyond benchmarking due date will also qualify for the performance pathway. The city deliberately allowed flexibility in meeting the performance standards because not all building types are eligible to receive an Energy Star score, but all building types are eligible to receive an energy use intensity or water use intensity score. We also allowed flexibility in choosing a performance pathway action because all buildings are different and could be in different places on their improvement journey. The performance pathway action taken will be chosen by the building's owner. Next slide. So, overall, a building can pursue the performance pathway if it satisfies key energy and water efficiency standards and has 3 years of complete benchmarking data. A qualified service provider will work with you on the data verification of prior year's benchmarking reports and the submission of a performance verification report. There will be more details provided on the qualified service providers in a future slide. Additionally, the performance verification report, as well as other submittal reports, will be made available on the Beyond Benchmarking webpage starting March 1st, 2023. Next slide. A building will fall into the improvement pathway if it does not satisfy key energy and water efficiency standards or does not have 3 years of complete benchmarking data. Your options within the improvement pathway are to complete an audit, retro-commissioning, or efficiency improvement measures. Additional information on these 3 improvement pathway options can be found in the compliance guide and in the official ordinance, which have been linked in this presentation but are also found on the Beyond Benchmarking webpage. You will work with a qualified service provider on one of these options and submit an improvement pathway form that will be submitted to the city. Next slide. Step 5 of compliance is to find a qualified service provider to assist you in completing your selected pathway. The service provider must meet ordinance outline qualifications in order to aid you in Beyond Benchmarking compliance. Service providers listed on our list of qualified service providers were verified by building performance ordinance staff to meet ordinance requirements and be eligible to conduct work in San Jose through 2023. Our service provider list is provided as a courtesy. You may select your own provider from anywhere. Just make sure they meet ordinance requirements and possess a San Jose business license. If they are not on our list of qualified providers, you will need to provide these details of their eligibility in your completion step. Our list of qualified service providers, as well as Energy Star's list of licensed professionals, can both be found on the Beyond Benchmarking webpage. Next slide. And finally, step 6 of compliance is to complete your pathways. For the performance pathway, a licensed professional will verify your 3 prior years of benchmarking data and work with you to complete the performance verification report. For the improvement pathway, you will need to have your audit, retro-commissioning, or efficiency upgrades planned or executed by your Beyond Benchmarking due date. If you are able to have your improvement pathway action executed by the due date, then you will work with a licensed professional to submit the improvement pathway form. If your action is planned but not yet executed by the due date, then you will need to submit supporting documentation that shows the project has been permitted and/or contracted. All these various submittal forms will be made available on our Beyond Benchmarking webpage starting March 1st, 2023. We plan to host another webinar that will go into the specifics of form submittals in early March 2023. Signups are already available for that webinar. Next slide. So now that we have gone through all the steps to compliance, we highly encourage you to take advantage of the many helpful resources that exist. They all live on our Beyond Benchmarking webpage. You will find a step-by-step compliance guide, FAQs, the compliance schedule, webinar schedule and signups, etc. We are also here to help. Email us at benchmarking@sanjose.gov and visit our main benchmarking website. We will be having additional webinars early next year that go into more detail on the performance pathway, the improvement pathway, and the form submittal process. The webinar schedule and signups can be found on the Beyond Benchmarking webpage. Next slide. Here's a quick look at our upcoming Beyond Benchmarking informational webinars. Once again, the schedule and signups are found on the Beyond Benchmarking webpage. Next slide. Thank you so much for joining us as we made our way through this presentation. We are going to open the floor to questions now for the remaining time. Okay, I see one question. Are there any details on the performance verification report at this time? So in terms of what the report exactly will look like, we are still developing that. This form will become available on the Beyond Benchmarking webpage by March 1st, 2023. In our compliance guide and in the ordinance, there are some specifics in terms of more for the improvement pathway of what the audit form would look like, for example. But yeah, in terms of the performance verification report, all the details we would have on that would be in the compliance guide or in the ordinance at this time. The form itself is not available yet. Okay. Michael, panel attendees had the ability to raise their hands, right?
Correct. If anyone has any other questions that they would like to announce, please go ahead and feel free to raise your hand now.
I see another question. What does the water EUI need to be for the performance route? I do not know the answer to that off the top of my head. I know it is in the ordinance and in the compliance guide, which are both linked on our Beyond Benchmarking webpage. Carol, go ahead if you know.
Yeah, the requirements for water are pretty much equivalent to energy. It's a 75 Energy Star water score or a 75 WUI, and the improvement points are equivalent.
Okay, any final questions? Okay, well, thank you all for coming. And yeah, feel free to reach out if you have any future questions through the email. And yeah, stay tuned for the future webinars, and the recording of this webinar will be posted on the webpage as well. All right. Have a great rest of your evening, everyone. Thanks so much.